Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I come together and help students understand the path to enlightenment. We start our classes with meditation, but then afterwards I'll share a talk with you. The talk that I share is based on this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Each Sunday we go chapter by chapter, helping students to be able to understand the path. And in 7 months, we actually cover this entire book. So today it's chapter 18, which is titled God's Creative Action. You Have Free Will. This is where you can learn about this being, of how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha didn't teach about this being of God, but he actually did. And for someone who hasn't seen that, they might think that the Buddha denied the existence of God. You might sometimes hear that, or you might hear that people say that the Buddha rejected God. This isn't actually true. He actually taught about this being, but he didn't put this being at the center of his teachings because it's not this being who determines whether or not you get to enlightenment or not. It's your own decision. So he put you at the center of his teachings. So I'm going to guide you in a meditation session, and then afterwards I'll share a talk with you, helping you understand how to get to enlightenment either with or without a relationship with this being. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start is with some chanting to be able to ease the mind into meditation. It helps you to get more benefit out of the meditation itself. It's important to understand that this isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony, or worship, or prayer, or anything like that. During the lifetime of the Buddha, chanting was used as a way to commit the teachings to memory, so that every 2 weeks it was used as a learning tool to be able to help his students to remember his teachings, where today we use it as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then I'm going to share some guidance, essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while we're actually meditating. But then there'll be a period of time where it's just quiet and everyone's meditating together, everyone here at the temple and anyone who's joining online. And then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and then that's where I'll start the class, helping you guys to understand this topic. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you can take whatever position's comfortable for you, and then I'll come back in after the chanting to guide you. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Aphivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Sama Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here, you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Emakewa Botang Mahakewanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakewa Arahang Sama Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Sata Tawa Manusarang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good evening to all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. As I was sharing, today's our group learning program where I share teachings with students to be able to help them understand the path to enlightenment. The individual who we refer to as the Buddha figured out 2,500 years ago about how to get to the enlightened mental state. What enlightenment is where the mind's been trained to the point where it's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. This is a mental state that you can attain in this life or at death, where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You can eliminate all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that can be eliminated from the mind through training the mind. Oftentimes people think that it's other people who are causing these feelings, but it's actually what's going on in your own mind that's causing these feelings. And this is why you can eliminate them, because it's the mind itself that's causing them. You can get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, where there's focus and concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice by the time you get to enlightenment that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming, that you don't have bitterness, harshness, and hostility in your mind anymore. So that's not coming out in your relationships. You can get to a point where you're not even in a bad mood any longer. So the Buddha taught this path of how to train the mind to get to this point. And there's other teachings that you need in order to be able to get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. Oftentimes people think the Buddha sat under a tree, he meditated, and then instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. He had spent 6 years to be able to train his mind to get to this enlightened mental state. And as part of his teachings, he shared other teachings about various aspects of the world. The thing that he actually discovered is that the mind in the unenlightened state lacks wisdom of how the world truly functions and how the world truly works and how your mind actually functions. So one of the topics that he taught about is this being of God. This being God is a being that he actually taught about at different times during his teachings, but oftentimes people think that he rejected the existence of this being, or that he denied the existence of this being. And this isn't actually true. He shared teachings about this being, but he didn't put this being at the center of his teachings, because it's not this being that determines whether or not you get to enlightenment. It's your own decisions that determine that. So he put you at the center of his teachings. For anyone who says that the Buddha denied the existence of God, or that he rejected God, or he didn't teach this topic, they haven't penetrated into his teachings deeply enough to be able to see that he actually did teach this topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you guys some teachings that'll help you to understand how you can get to enlightenment, either with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. So just like your neighbor, you could actually choose to have a relationship with that person. And it's kind of nice. It's kind of wonderful, because if you need to borrow some salt or sugar, or you're going out of town and you need someone to look over your house, you can go talk to your neighbor and they'll probably help you out. But you can also go through life without a relationship with your neighbor. You'll be just fine, right? It's the same thing with this being of God. But oftentimes people have been taught various things that are untrue about this being, and therefore they have all kinds of difficulties with any type of understanding of this being, or even potentially even having a relationship with this being. So I'm going to help you guys to see this in a way that you can independently verify. If you guys have questions as we go, I'm going to be pausing a few times and opening up for questions. Here at the temple, we have microphones. If you guys can get a microphone, that'll be helpful so the people online can hear you. All you need to do is get a microphone, press the gray button. You'll see the lights come on, and you can hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share it with them. And if you could turn it off when you're not using it, that'll be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So in order to get started with this topic, what I'm going to do is share a definition with you guys of how I think about this being of God. You may or may not think about this being in that way, but that's fine. You can think about this being however you like, but at least you'll understand when I use this word God, that what is it that I'm referring to. So the way that I think about this being is as the creator of the universe and the source of all moral authority, the supreme being. Some people refer to this being as God, or Allah, or the all-knowing and all-powerful. This being is omniscient or omnipotent, meaning it can understand everything about the world from the beginning of the world all the way to the end of the world. So this is the supreme being, the being that can understand all things about life. And now this being, sometimes when I talk about this moral authority, people are saying, well, what is this moral authority? What is this virtuous behavior or this moral conduct? The Buddha taught about natural laws. He didn't give rules or commandments that everybody needs to follow. He didn't teach a bunch of beliefs that if you believe a bunch of things, something wonderful is going to happen for you at the end of this life. He's teaching you how to learn and grow and develop in this life to be able to make wise decisions about training your mind and how you interact with the people around you. And there's certain moral conduct that we function through, and that if we make wise decisions, then we experience wholesome results. But if we make unwise decisions about how we choose to interact in the world, then we experience unwholesome results. So this is the moral conduct that the Buddha is teaching about these natural laws, and it's this being that is the source of all of that. It's important to understand that we have free will. Sometimes when people talk about this being of God, they talk about this being controlling you or determining what it is that you experience on a day-to-day basis. Or some people even talk about how this being might have a plan for you and you need to kind of fulfill that plan. This isn't actually true. You have free will. This being isn't controlling you. It's not having some kind of predetermined plan for you. You don't need to worship and pray to this being or any of these kinds of things. This being is doing the thing that is the most loving and most caring thing you could ever do, which is not put your expectations on others and try to control this other person or this other being to do things a certain way. So we all have free will. It's not this being that determines what we experience on a day-to-day basis. So as I shared, it's not God that grants enlightenment. And a practitioner is attaining enlightenment through their own choices to learn, practice, and to train the mind to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. It's not this being that determines whether you get to this enlightened mental state or not. So some of the things to keep in mind as it relates to the teachings of the Buddha and this being of God, that the Buddha never denied the existence of God, but instead he taught how to train the mind to get to enlightenment, to liberate the mind and have peacefulness and joy while understanding this being. The Buddha discussed various gods during his lifetime because at that time people believed in multiple gods. So he was talking about these different gods that people believed in. The Buddha's objective wasn't to prove or disprove God's existence. Instead, it was to share the teachings that would help people get to the point where the mind's liberated or it's free. It's experiencing the peace and the joy of this enlightened mental state. And that is accomplished through independent verification of the truth, where you can actually see the wisdom of these natural laws and how the world truly functions. So the Buddha focused people's minds on enlightenment, and this is based on what we call right view, which you guys will understand a little bit more of what that is in a moment. And it's also based on what's called the natural law of karma. Some people refer to this as the natural law of karma. You might have heard that. That's the Sanskrit word. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so we use the word karma. What this means is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. Any decision that you make, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce a whole certain results, either a wholesome result or wholesome karma, or unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So it's not this being of God that's determining what you experience on a moment by moment basis. It's your decisions that lead to any particular result that you're experiencing. So we all have free will. So some things from the Buddha. This is a teaching where he was actually sharing about, I'm going to stop for questions in a little bit. You'll see when I stop for questions. So the Buddha taught about this being of God, and this is some of his words about this being, and he was actually talking to some other people. So I'll share this with you guys so you can see that the Buddha actually taught about this being, because oftentimes people think that he didn't teach about this being. This is titled, All is Caused by God's Creative Action. The Buddha actually, during his lifetime, he was teaching, and he had certain students that were learning from him, but there were also other people who were teaching and claiming that their teachings led to enlightenment as well. So these people that were teaching were called ascetics, or roamers and wanderers that were looking to get to enlightenment. And then there were people called Brahmin. Brahmin today we might actually call as a Hindu priest. This is an individual who's doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, collecting money from others to be able to do these ceremonies. This is what a Brahmin is. So these ascetics and Brahmin, these are individuals who are kind of like dabbling in the same area of information and teachings that the Buddha was teaching, but the Buddha put together the complete package of what it takes to be able to get to this enlightened mental state, where these other people who were teaching, their teachings didn't actually lead to enlightenment. But nonetheless, the Buddha would come into contact with these people from time to time. So this is a teaching from the Buddha where he says, "Then, monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmin who hold such a doctrine in view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine in view?" So we approach these people that have the idea that it's because of God that they experience pleasure, pain, and neither pain nor pleasure. And he asked them, he says, is this true that that's what you guys think? And when he asked them this, they affirmed it, meaning they said, yes, that's what we actually think, that it's because of God that we experience the certain results that we experience in day-to-day life. Then I say to them, in such a case, it is due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. So these are things that an individual might choose to do, is actually kill or steal or have sexual activity or have false speech or produce argumentative speech or speak harshly and aggressive. Sometimes people think that's coming from others, that the reason why you're speaking that way, but it's actually coming from your own mind. It's not coming from other people, and it's not coming from God as well. That's what the Buddha is getting to. Indulge in idle chatter. This is where you just kind of talk endlessly without any purpose or benefit. Then there's the mind full of longing, which is craving, desire. The mind's longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of its affection. Having ill will, this is like hostility, bitterness, resentment towards others. And then holding wrong view is to not understand that it's your own mind that's causing the feelings that you experience. Oftentimes people have this wrong view where they think that it's other people who are causing them to experience certain feelings. But what you come to understand in a way that you can independently verify through the teachings of the Buddha is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And when you establish this through being able to learn, reflect, and practice to see the truth for yourself, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then you have what's called right view. You can actually see rightly that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And that's why you can actually eliminate them. Whereas if it was everyone else who was causing these feelings, you wouldn't actually be able to eliminate your feelings and these discontent feelings. So if someone holds wrong view, then that means they haven't penetrated into understanding that it's their own mind that causes these feelings. So he says, is it because of God that you experience all of these things? And then he says, those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done. They do not make an effort in this respect. Because if you think that everything you're experiencing is because of God, then why would you ever do any work to improve what it is that you experience on a day-to-day basis? Because you're just kind of blaming what you experience on God rather than cultivating wisdom and making better decisions in your life to experience improved results. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard themselves, and even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. So when somebody has a lack of wisdom, when their mind is in the unenlightened state, the Buddha refers to this as muddle-minded, because the mind will lack concentration and focus. Because the Buddha discovered these individual pollutions that are in the mind, and when you use the tools and the techniques that he taught and you uproot those out of the mind, you'll see that your mind has focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. But when you have these pollutions in the mind, you'll be hindered from that. You'll have a lack of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. And that's why the mind's muddled. So he refers to people who don't understand that what's going on within their own mind. They don't understand what's going on in their life. He can see that their mind is muddled and it's lacking crisp clarity. But by the time you train your mind to get to enlightenment, it'll be crisp and clear. You won't have a muddled mind. You'll have a focused and concentrated mind. And he says they do not guard themselves. Whenever the Buddha talks about a guard, this is your mindfulness. When you have awareness of mind, you're aware of what's going on in your own mind. And in your journey to enlightenment, when you're aware of the anger and the frustration and all these other feelings arising, with your mindfulness being aware of that, you can actually apply effort to cut that off and get it out of your mind. And if you do this enough, you can actually transform your mind where you'll never experience anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings. But if you think that it's God that's the reason why you are actually experiencing these feelings, then you wouldn't be guarding your mind and watching over your mind to be able to transform it. So that's why he says they do not guard themselves. And then he says even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. Because if someone was an ascetic during the lifetime of the Buddha, that means they're on the path to enlightenment. They're training their mind to be able to get to enlightenment. But if you aren't understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings and you think that it's God that's the reason why you experience what you experience, the Buddha is saying you're not even on the path to enlightenment at that point. Because why would you ever do anything to improve your own mind in your own life if it's because of God that you're experiencing all these things? So a person who thinks that it's God that's determining what it is that they experience on a day-to-day basis, the Buddha is saying that you're not even on the path to enlightenment. So this is a teaching here that the Buddha helps you to be able to see that you have free will. And that by you accepting responsibility for your own feelings and what you experience on a day-to-day basis, now you can do something about it. But if you think that it's somebody else that's causing you to experience certain feelings, you'll just continue to experience those over and over and over again. In relationship to the teachings of the Buddha and some other things he taught in this area, because when you learn about God and other disciplines and other teachings, they usually teach about certain things. These are certain undeclared teachings that the Buddha didn't teach. He left them as undeclared intentionally. He actually calls it out. And these are things that you usually hear about from other people who are teaching this topic of God. So I included it here in this chapter so that people would understand it. So the Buddha gets to a point at one point where he says, remember, what did I teach? I taught this. And he points to a certain teaching where he says, I taught the elimination of discontentedness. That's what he taught. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach any of these things. He didn't teach whether the world is eternal or not eternal. He didn't teach whether the world is finite or infinite. He left that as an undeclared teaching. He also didn't declare whether the soul is the same as the body or the soul is one thing and the body is another. In fact, he didn't even teach about a soul. He left that as an undeclared teaching because the idea of a soul, it actually conflicts with the universal truth of impermanence and the universal truth of non-self. So he left this as a undeclared teaching. And then he talks here, he says, after death, the Tathagata exists. After death, the Tathagata does not exist. After death, both the Tathagata exists and does not exist. And after death, the Tathagata neither exists nor not exist. So a Tathagata is an actual Buddha. So he would refer to himself as the Tathagata, which is what this means is the one who's discovered the truth or the one who shares the truth. Not everybody who gets to enlightenment is a Buddha, but he's talking about himself and he's saying, I'm not going to declare what happens next for me after this life because he had already gotten to enlightenment. So what he's essentially saying is he's not going to declare what comes next for an enlightened being. Oftentimes people are taught that the goal of this life is to be a really good person in this life. And then in your, after this life, you're going to go maybe to heaven and live for eternity in this wonderful palace, in this great place. That's not what the teachings of the Buddha are guiding you towards, because that's not true reality. That's not what actually is occurring. He explains that if you don't get to enlightenment and you die, you experience this rebirth, continuous rebirth over and over and over again. But in terms of getting to enlightenment, once you die, he doesn't say what's next, because in order to get to enlightenment, you need to eliminate the longing, the yearning, the craving. You need to get to the point where you're content and peaceful and joyful in the present moment. But if your mind is longing, yearning for what's next, that means you're not content and peaceful in the present moment. So the Buddha wisely didn't declare what comes next after enlightenment, so that way people could actually get to a point where they're completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. And by the time you get to enlightenment, if there is something next, okay, great. It's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. And if there is nothing next, then okay, that's fine. You're already peaceful. You're already joyful. So the Buddha never declared what comes next. And he did this wisely so that you could focus your mind on getting to enlightenment in this life, not longing, yearning for something next. So I'm just going to pause here for a second. What I'm going to do is open up for questions, because after this, I'm going to share with you how you can get to enlightenment either with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. But I just shared this information just to kind of establish some understanding before we go into that. So does anybody here or anybody online have a question? Remember, if you guys could use the microphones, or online, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any questions you like that way. So yes, young man, did you have a question? There's microphones right behind you. You just press the gray button and hold it. You'll see the lights come on. And then once the lights come on, the microphone will be engaged. There you go.
So, who is the Gotama Buddha?
Gotama Buddha is the way that we refer to the Buddha. This is the individual that lived 2,500 years ago, and he figured out how to get to this enlightened mental state. So the common way to refer to him is the Buddha, but oftentimes people refer to him as Gotama Buddha because his last name was Gotama, and then that way we know exactly who we're talking about is Gotama Buddha, not just kind of generally the Buddha.
Once I heard that there was 8 beings that achieved enlightenment, so are they also referred to as Buddhas or just?
In order to be a Buddha, there needs to be three main criteria that are met. The first one is that you need to get to enlightenment by yourself without the help of any teachers or any guides. The next thing is you dedicate the rest of your life to sharing your independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during your lifetime. And then the third criteria is that you preserve your teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after your death. So this is how we can identify a Buddha. And this type of individual is very rare in the world. The last one that we currently know of existed over 2,500 years ago. So, for example, you'd be able to get to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be a Buddha at that point because you're going to need teachers and guides to be able to help you. You're welcome. Okay, so let me just check online if we have any questions here. Okay, looks like we have a question coming soon. It says, I wonder what is the song you sang before and after meditation, and what is it used for? So this isn't actually a song. These are three separate chants that are used in this particular tradition of teachings, where you open up any kind of event that you're actually having. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, that every 2 weeks, the students would chant his teachings in order to commit them to their memory, be able to learn them. Where today we have audiobooks, we have books, videos, podcasts to be able to study the teachings. They didn't have that 2,500 years ago, so they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. It was a learning tool, a learning device. Where today we use it as a way to ease the mind into meditation and out of meditation. So these are chants that you'll commonly see people using. And I don't even think the Buddha created these specific chants that we were chanting, because they have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And you wouldn't see that the Buddha would create those chants, because if he handed out chants and said, hey, chant these chants to me out of respect for me, this would be ego and arrogance. So we use these as a way today to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation, because we have books and audiobooks, videos, and podcasts to be able to study. We don't need chanting in order to be able to commit the teachings to memory. Okay, so now, to help you understand how to get to enlightenment while still having a relationship with this being of God, the way that you can do this is to be able to learn and understand the things that I'm going to share with you. So a relationship with God isn't required in order to attain enlightenment, because, as I said, it's not this being that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. But also, having a relationship with this being won't hinder you from getting to enlightenment, as long as you understand the things that I'm sharing and you're able to practice in this way. Because oftentimes people's mind have been conditioned to think one way or another about this being, and you need to be able to see true reality. So the first thing is, if you're going to have a relationship with God, you're going to need to practice what's called right view, is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings through the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths of the Buddha will help you to be able to independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings based in craving, desire, attachment, where part of right view is to also accept responsibility and accountability for what it is that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life. Where if people thought that it was this being of God that was controlling what they experience on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to be able to have a healthy relationship with this being, because you'll just blame this being for the things that you experience. You get in a car accident, you'll blame this being. Or maybe your parents or your grandparents die. You might blame this being for taking them away from you. Or maybe you get a bad grade in school and you might think that it's this being that's doing that to you. And then in that situation, you never cultivate wisdom to be able to make improved decisions and experience better results. If you blame other people for what you experience, you're just hindering your ability to be able to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results. So you need to be able to maintain your own responsibility for your feelings and emotions in your mind and what you experience on a day-to-day basis. And this will allow you to then not blame this being for the things that you experience. And this will help you to have a more healthy relationship with this being. If you have a craving in your mind towards this being to obtain things, like through prayer, where you're treating this being of God like genie in a bottle, this being actually doesn't answer prayers and give you things. This is what people think, that if you sit down and pray, that this being is going to change something about your life. this isn't the way that the world actually works. The way that the world works is anything that you experience in a day-to-day life, it's coming from decisions that you make. So if we sit down and we pray thinking that this being is going to change our life, then we're actually practicing wrong view. That we need to be able to see that this being isn't a genie in a bottle. It doesn't grant wishes and prayers like a genie in a bottle. And you need to be able to see that through your own decisions, through your own independent verification. Don't believe me that this being doesn't answer prayers, but don't believe other people that this being does answer prayers. You can try it for yourself. Like, let's just say right now that we're interested in feeding disadvantaged beings here in Thailand that don't have food. Let's put our hands together maybe and just pray. Dear God, please give me $5 million so that I can take this money and go buy some food and feed the Thai people that are hungry and needing food. Do we see that money anywhere? No, it doesn't come like that. If we're interested in going to feed people who need food, we're going to need to make the decision to acquire those resources and then actually provide that food. It's not this being that's going to do that for us. So sometimes people sit down and they pray, longing, yearning, and wanting this being to give them something, right? I can't imagine being this being of God, but let's just say that you were, and you're just getting these constant requests from billions of people of wanting something from you. If you had a friend or a family member that would call you up on the phone every single day and asking you for something, hey, give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that, how long would it take before you stopped answering the phone? Maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 phone calls of them constantly asking you for stuff, you'd stop answering the phone, right? So this being isn't just sitting off somewhere in the clouds waiting to hear some request from somebody and then granting you a wish. If you're going to get food, clothing, shelter, medical care, if you're going to have a better career, better relationships, it's going to come from your decisions that's going to be produced, not from this being. So if somebody was interested in praying, which it's up to you whether you decide to do that or not, you might say that you understand that this being exists, or maybe you believe that this being exists. Some people have had interaction with this being and that knows that this being exists with 100% certainty. I'm one of those people. I know that this being exists with 100% certainty. I don't believe in this being. I know that this being exists with 100% certainty. But for some people, they haven't had that interaction. So you might just say, I believe in you, or I would like to know of your existence. And then let them know that you're open to their guidance, because this being can actually guide you and help you with wisdom. And maybe you give thanks and appreciation to this being, that this being is willing to be able to provide you that guidance. That would be a way to pray, rather than asking and longing, yearning, treating this being like a genie in a bottle. So if somebody has a craving to be with this being in heaven, and they think that that's what's going to happen, is that they're going to live this life, and then at the end of this life, this being is going to determine whether you go to a good place or a bad place, that's not what this being is doing. Because oftentimes people think of this being as sitting in judgment of us, and that it's going to send us to a good place or a bad place. And how can you have a healthy relationship with a being that you think that way about? And you can see that this isn't actually true, because people think about this being of God as being so wise and being so loving. Well, you guys aren't necessarily having those same qualities of mind at this point in time. But ask yourself, if you had a son or if you had a daughter and they made a mistake, would you send them to a place to burn for eternity because they made a mistake? I suspect the answer would be no, that you're not going to just send somebody you care about and somebody you love to burn for eternity. But that's what people think, and that's what people have taught over the years, and your mind might be conditioned to think that's the case. Or there's the other side, where people think if you believe properly and if you worship properly, that you're going to magically enter into this permanent existence in heaven, and you're going to have this wonderful life for the rest of eternity. This isn't actually true. That's not the way the world actually works. You can see that the world around you is impermanent. It's constantly changing. This is a universal truth. This realm of heaven and this realm of hell is not a permanent existence. And you can see that if you look at it closely. So if somebody has a craving, desire, attachment towards this being of God, your mind's going to need to eliminate that, where you're no longer holding on to this being, expecting and wanting it to do certain things for you, because you can only be happy if you get what you want. So, for example, if you have your mom or your grandmother's in the hospital and they're close to death, and you pray and beg and plead with this being to save your mom or save your grandmother, and they end up dying, you might think that it's this being who caused that. And now you might be angry or frustrated because you think this being didn't do what you wanted it to do. But the reason why grandma and mom died is because they were born. They have to die. Every single one of us will experience that our life is not permanent. Because we were born, we will experience sickness, aging, and death. Every single one of us. So people are oftentimes attributing this to this being of God. And now they might have anger, hostility towards this being. So we need to be able to see it that it's the natural law of karma that is producing any type of results in our day-to-day life. This is not anything mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's not about punishments and rewards. There's no entity or being that's overseeing this natural law. This is a sequence of events that whenever we make certain decisions, we will experience a result. That if there's anything in your life that you don't particularly care for that's occurring, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. It's kind of like if I was walking down the beach and there was wind blowing in my face and I'm kicking up the sand and the sand is blowing back in my face. If I'm like, this is good luck or bad luck, or this is my destiny, or this is my fate, or this is God or some entity called the universe that is causing this, or this is other people that are causing this. Well, I'm just going to continue to walk down the beach kicking up sand, and I'm going to keep experiencing that unwholesome result. But if I can see through the natural law of karma that it's my choices that are leading to any particular result that I experience, now if I don't like what I'm experiencing, all I need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and then I'll experience different results. I can just choose to stop kicking up sand, and now I will experience improved results. So if you need help to be able to see that it's your own decisions that are leading to any result that you're experiencing, ask yourself these questions. Who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing? Who chose your hairstyle? Who chose whether or not you ate dinner or breakfast? Who chose your job or occupation? Who chose the location where you live? Who chose the friends or family that you spend time with? These are all choices that you're making, but oftentimes we blame what we experience on other people. So we need to be able to see very clearly that what we experience is a result of decisions that we're making. Sometimes people have this fear towards this being of God. People have been taught to fear this being because they think that this being is producing unwholesome results for us. They think that if somebody dies in your life, that it's this being that is causing that. Or if you get into a car accident, that it's this being that has chosen that for you. And now you might fear this being. Well, if you have fear towards a particular individual that's in your life, how could you ever have a healthy relationship with that person? Like say you had a certain life partner or a certain friend or a roommate that you were living with and that you had fear of this person. How could you ever have a harmonious relationship if you have fear in your mind whenever you're experiencing interaction with that particular person? So you need to eliminate any kind of fear that you have because this being isn't the one that's producing unwholesome results in your life. It's our own decisions that are leading to that. So when I teach this, sometimes people say, well, if it's not God that I need to pray to in order to get the things that I want, and if it's not God that's determining what I experience, and I don't need to fear this being, then what is the purpose of this being? Why is this being even around? Like, how can I understand this being? Well, one of the things that I share with people is that you might think about this being as a practitioner of these teachings, that this being understands these teachings very well because this being understands the natural laws. This being isn't attached to us and is not responsible to restrain us. Because one of the things that people say, well, if there's this all-loving, all-powerful God, why would there be rapes and murders and child poverty and things like this? Why would this being allow these things to occur in the world? Well, it's not this being that's causing that stuff. It's human beings that are making choices that are leading to the rapes and the murders and the child poverty and the things of this nature. This being isn't restraining us from our unwise decisions, because if this being constantly restrained us from our unwise decisions, we wouldn't be interested in living in that world, because this being would be controlling everything that we experience. And if this being constantly restrained us from the decisions that we were going to make, we would never cultivate the wisdom to make better decisions. So this being would have to be constantly restraining us. I learned this very early in life when my son was born. He's now about 13, almost 14 years old. There was a period of time when he was starting to crawl and walk around that he kept going over to the stove and he kept trying to touch the stove. And I would restrain him and I would pull him away from the stove. And then as soon as I let him go, he would walk back over to the stove and try to touch the stove. And then I would pull him back, and then he would go over to the stove and I would pull him back. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let him touch the stove. And then he can cultivate the wisdom that it's unwise to touch the stove. So we started walking over to the stove and he was holding his hand out and he hadn't even touched the stove yet. And he could feel the heat and he yanked his hand back and he never touched the stove ever again. Right? So by not restraining him, that was the most loving and kind thing that I could do, because then he cultivated the needed wisdom that he shouldn't be touching this. And that's what this being of God is doing. This being isn't attached to us, that it's not longing, yearning for us to experience any particular thing in life. This being is interested in seeing us live in harmony with each other. But this being is wise enough to understand that in order for us to live in harmony with each other, each of us need to cultivate wisdom. We each need to train our mind. It's not this being that's going to snap their fingers and instantly create harmony for us. If we're going to create harmony in the world, we need to make choices to create that harmony. So this being is interested in seeing harmony throughout the world, and it's through us all acquiring wisdom that it's going to produce the harmony. And this being doesn't restrain us from our unwise decisions, because we'll never actually cultivate wisdom. So if we cultivate wisdom, then we can create harmony for ourselves. So this is how you would get to enlightenment, with a relationship with this being. Let me pause and see if you guys have any questions on this. Remember, you guys can use the microphones, and online you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom.
Audible? Okay. You said that you know that such a being exists. You don't have belief. What leads you to, what led you to that knowledge, or why do you have such strong conviction?
I've had constant interaction with this being, where this being is shown to me that this being exists. I could tell you example after example after example, but you would just have to believe me because you weren't there to actually see these things occur. But there's been different people that have had different experiences over the course of their life. And I had countless experiences where this being was able to show me that it exists. And that's how I know that this being exists. But again, if I shared those things with you, you wouldn't have any way to confirm that. The way that this being actually functions is, if it wanted to, it has enough power that it could shake the entire earth. It could turn the sky red and purple and green, and it could rain down lightning bolts and show everybody the power that this being has. But that's not what this being's interested in. This being isn't interested in fear, and this being isn't interested in convincing people that it actually exists. So it doesn't do things on a large scale like that typically. It can, but it doesn't typically do that. Instead, this being usually interacts with each individual individually and provides that person with insight to be able to see that it exists. And I was able to interact with this being without my asking for it. This being actually started to do things around me to be able to show me that this being exists. And that's how I know that it exists. Mm-hmm.
Is it always positive, like the things that the being would do to you? Or can it also be, can it also be, I don't know, in a certain way, like painful or...
This being of God would only ever do things that are wholesome and helpful and beneficial. This being has nothing but unconditional love in its mind for you. What unconditional love is that you don't have to meet any condition in order for this being to love you. That this love this being loves you unconditionally. No matter what choices and decisions that you make, this being still has love for you, which isn't what the human beings typically have in their mind. What human beings think love is actually not love. Like if someone's falling in love and out of love with someone, or if they think that love is painful and love hurts, that actually isn't love. But when you understand what true love is, or unconditional love, and you see that the human mind is capable of practicing this, then you'll be able to understand that this being has unconditional love for everybody. So whenever this being tries to interact with you or does interact with you, it would only be wholesome things. It would never do anything to hurt you or cause harm to you.
The reason I just ask is because I've had certain situations where, it was like, okay, this is so lucky, and this is like, it's so amazing what just happened to me. It was very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've also had situations where it's like, like I could have done everything right, but then what happened to me was extremely painful or extremely traumatizing. So that's the reason why I ask, is it always just wholesome, or like when do I kind of know that this is, like an existence of God?
Yeah, so this being God isn't the one who's orchestrating certain things to happen for you in your life. If you experienced a certain thing, it's from decisions that you're making. There's actually no such thing as good luck or bad luck. It just doesn't exist. Everything you experience is a cause and effect. There's certain decisions that you make and certain results that you experience. So it's not this being that's choosing that, but this being does things like, I can give you some of the examples that I experienced, but again, you have no way of actually independently verifying it. But it's not that this being is like giving you something or producing some kind of result for you in life. It's that this being has a way of showing its power and showing its strength and its knowledge without actually impacting you in a negative way. So if you're experiencing either wholesome or unwholesome results in your life, it's from decisions that you are making. It's not good luck or bad luck. It's not from this particular being. But you might have had interaction with this being. The way that some people experience interaction with this being is the way that I think about it is almost like fatherly advice, that this being is almost like helping you to see things about the world and wisdom that you didn't have previously. You still need to be able to learn, reflect, and practice to independently verify what it is that you're experiencing. And it's not like you can come to a fork in the road and you can just sit there and be like, all right, God, give me the answer. That's not the way this being works. But if you're just going about your day, this being can actually provide you guidance and give you wisdom that are going to actually help you in life. And that's not what I'm talking about how this being actually verified for me that this being exists. Those things did happen for me multiple times. That's one of the ways I know this being exists. But there was many other things that were far beyond this that helped me to be able to see that this being exists. But what you're talking about sounds like you just experienced a certain result, and these were from decisions that you were making that you might not necessarily attribute it to the decisions that you made. But if we talked about it, I would be able to help you see that there were certain decisions that you made that led to that particular result, that it wasn't good luck or bad luck, and it wasn't this being either.
This is less of a question, but maybe just a comment on what you said, because
it's best if you have questions, because when you come to the temple, if you just teach other people, that's not wise.
Okay, maybe I'll speak with you after then.
Yeah, that's a better thing. Yeah. Okay, you guys all done? Okay. We have some questions coming in on Zoom as well. Let's see. Please share an example. Susan would like to hear some examples. Okay, so there was a period of time where I was going through a very strong struggle in my life, a very difficult struggle, and I was really shut in, and I was living a very closed life. And there was a time where I felt all this energy kind of building up in the lower parts of my body. And I laid down on the bed and I felt this enormous energy coming through my body, and it reached up to my head, and there was this big pressure that built in my head, and then it released out through my head. And when that occurred, it was like the whole body was tingling and had this enjoyable, pleasant sensation. And I knew that this was not permanent. So I laid there for a little bit, and I was very loopy actually while it was occurring. But then eventually I got up, and even though I was very disgruntled and frustrated in the past, I had an enormous smile on my face, and I was so cheerful and so happy. And I went downstairs in our house, and like I was saying, I was leading a very closed life, and I had all the windows closed and the doors closed and locked. And I opened up all the windows to let all the sun in. I opened up all the doors, and I went outside to take a big breath of fresh air. And then I came back into the house and sit on the sofa, and I left the doors open. And this yellow butterfly came in, and it flew right up to my nose, and then it turned around and it went out of the house. And then after it went out of the house, I jumped up to go see the butterfly, and the butterfly had disappeared. And I came back to my computer because it was sitting on the sofa, and on my screen it said, "Don't follow the butterfly." And then I went upstairs because my wife was upstairs at the time. And at this time, I used to follow my wife about all the things that she used to do. And I used to just listen to all the things that she would do. And I would never really think for myself about what would be wise or unwise. I would just rely on her and be dependent on her. So I went upstairs, and she was actually getting ready to get in the shower, and she was all naked in the bathroom. And when I opened the door, she has this huge butterfly tattoo on her hip. And the message was, don't follow the butterfly. And I needed to be able to understand that I needed to make my own decisions and not to just follow what my wife was thinking all the time, that I needed to be able to cultivate my own wisdom. So this is just one of many things that I experienced where this is the only being that could have orchestrated something like that. From the butterfly coming into my house, to it disappearing, to having that message on my computer, to how it related to my wife and the wisdom that it was able to cultivate because of it. And then all the results that came after that as a result of me choosing not to follow the butterfly, not to follow my wife. So that's just one example, Susan. So let's see. All right. I don't see any other questions. So this last part, this is actually really straightforward. If you have no interest in having a relationship with this being of God whatsoever and still getting to enlightenment, you can actually do that, because it's not this being that determines whether or not you get to enlightenment or not. But if you're not interested in having a relationship with this being, there's something that you need to be able to understand, because sometimes people harbor anger and hostility and bitterness towards others. And this is because the mind has craving, desire, attachment, wanting things to be a certain way. And you can only be happy when somebody does it your way. And if they don't do it your way, then you get angry or frustrated or bitter or hostile towards that person or towards that being. So for example, if you grew up and you were in an environment where maybe you were being physically or sexually abused by people who were maybe supposed to be functioning in a community of godly people, and if you think that it's God that actually determines what you experience, if you experience physical or sexual abuse as you were growing up in certain environments, particularly environments where they're supposed to be godly people, you might actually be angry or bitter or harsh or hostile, thinking that this being, maybe you have hatred towards this being of God, where you need to be able to understand that if those types of things happened to you as you were growing up, it wasn't this being that determined that those things happened for you. It was those people that you were around that made the decision to do those things, not this being of God. So what you need to be able to do if you have no interest in having a relationship with this being of God is you need to at least have loving kindness for all beings. If you have anger and hatred in your mind towards any being whatsoever, even the slightest dislike, when we have dislike in our mind, people oftentimes think that it's coming from the other person, but it actually is coming from your own mind, because the mind's craving this permanence, wanting everybody to do things a certain way. And you can only be happy if people do things your way. But if they don't do things your way, you will have dislike towards them. So sometimes people think that they can hold their anger and hatred like in the corner of their mind, and it's only going to be directed towards that one person or that small group of people. But in reality, that anger and hatred in the mind is actually causing harm within your own mind. Sometimes people will have resentment and hostility towards towards someone, maybe like an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend or husband or wife or something like that, and they just hold on to this for many years and maybe even decades, and they think that they're getting back at the other person by holding on to this resentment and hostility. But this is like holding on to a hot coal and trying to burn somebody else. The only person getting burned is yourself. So if you're holding on to anger and hatred towards this being of God, the only person that's getting harmed by that is yourself. So if you're going to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God, you're going to need to at least get to the point where you don't have anger and hostility towards this being. Because if you have anger and hostility in your mind towards any being whatsoever, including this being, then your mind's not free. It's not liberated. It's not experiencing peace and joy permanently because you still have anger and hostility in your mind. So you need to eliminate that. And there's a meditation that actually helps you with this. It's called loving kindness meditation. And I teach this from time to time in all the various classes, courses, and retreats that I share, where it essentially rewires your mind to be loving and kind towards yourself and all beings to the point where you can eliminate even the slightest dislike towards others. So if you're not interested in having a relationship with God, that's fine. You can still get to enlightenment. You just need to make sure you eliminate your anger and hatred towards this being, if there's any that exists. There may or may not even be anger towards this being. If you don't have anger towards this being and you're not interested in having a relationship with this being, done. Move on to the next thing. Learn the next topic in order to be able to move your mind to enlightenment. But if you have anger and hatred towards this being and you are interested in getting to enlightenment, but you're not interested in having a relationship with this being, you're going to need to uproot that anger and hostility, or else you're not going to be able to experience the peace and the joy, the liberation of mind. So any questions on this part about how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God? All right, let me see it here online. Okay, I don't see any questions here either. Okay, so what I'll do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you here. Thank you for everyone who's online, who's joining as well. If you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for you guys to do that. You can check our bulletin board over there for all the different classes, courses, and retreats. We have a website as well that has all those details. Next week on Sunday, I'm going to be in chapter 19, which is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where you learn about the life story of the Buddha and the motivating factors that motivated him to be able to go on this journey to enlightenment. So I'm going to be teaching that next week as part of our class. And then you can see all the other events that we have on our website as well. I encourage people to start with this first book of our book series. You can actually get it for free by downloading it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon. This book is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is what's going to help you to get started and move on this journey towards enlightenment. And then each Sunday I go chapter by chapter in this book, helping students to be able to understand. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.